All right, today we are diving into a technology that could totally change our food, our planet, really everything. It's a huge topic, so let's get right into it.
I mean, just read that sentence. It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, doesn't it? But it's not. It's real, and it's happening right now. This one idea gets to the absolute core of what we're talking about today. Real animal meat grown without ever having to raise and slaughter an animal. So, how on earth is that even possible?
Well, the answer is a totally new field of science called cellular agriculture. You can think of it as a completely new way of making food, a whole new toolkit for humanity.
Okay, so it is super important to get this straight. This is not another veggie burger. It's not a plant-based substitute that just tastes like meat. This is actual meat on a molecular level. The only difference, and it's a huge one, is how it's made. We're essentially farming the cells directly instead of farming a whole animal just to get to those cells. So let's break down how you actually grow meat. First, you take a tiny sample of cells from a living animal, something totally harmless like drawing blood. Then you put those cells in a cultivator and you feed them. You give them all the nutrients they need to thrive. Sugars, amino acids, all the good stuff. The cells need something to grow on, so you give them a scaffold for structure. And finally, you let them mature into real muscle tissue inside what's called a bioreactor, which is just a sterile, controlled environment that's perfect for growth. Okay, so we've got the what and the how, but the really big question is why? Why are we doing this? I mean, we have a food system that works, right? Well, the truth is that system is stretched to its absolute breaking point. Just look at this picture. It really says it all. On the left, you've got a typical chicken from the 1950s. On the right, a modern chicken. And get this, they're the exact same age. We have bred these animals to grow so freakishly large, so fast, that their own legs can't even support their bodies. This is the reality of industrial agriculture. And it's not just about animal welfare, not by a long shot. When you cram so many animals together, you're basically creating a perfect incubator for disease. Since 2018, African swine fever has wiped out roughly 1/4 of the world's entire pig population. Think about that for a second. That's a catastrophic failure, and it shows just how fragile our food supply has become.
And then, of course, there's the environmental cost. You know, you can't exactly build a vertical farm for cows, but you sure can stack bioreactors. And that's where these numbers come from. The early projections are just staggering. We're talking about potentially 99% less land use, 96% less water, and a 96% reduction in greenhouse gases compared to raising cattle. The positive impact here could be absolutely massive.
So, who is making all this happen? A technology this revolutionary doesn't just appear out of thin air. It takes a dedicated community, a real movement, to build an entire field from scratch. And there's one key organization we really have to talk about.
And that organization is New Harvest. They're a nonprofit, and they've been at this since way back in 2004, long before almost anyone else was taking it seriously. They've been absolutely fundamental, funding the earliest university research, helping kickstart companies like Perfect Day that make real milk protein without a cow, and it was their director, Isha Datar, who actually came up with the name cellular agriculture.
So what does New Harvest actually do? Well, you can think of them as the neutral architects of this whole field. Their goal is to build it for the public good. They fund open source research, so the science isn't all locked up inside private companies. They bring everyone together, the scientists, the startups, the regulators, and crucially, they focus on educating the public, because none of this works if people don't understand what it is and why it matters. Now, this all sounds pretty incredible, right? But let's pump the brakes for a second. We have to be real here. We're still in the very early innings, and there are some major challenges to solve before you'll see this stuff in your local grocery store. The biggest hurdle has always been the cost. That very first burger back in 2013, it cost €250,000 for one patty. Today, we're looking at prices as low as $50 a pound. That is an absolutely mind-blowing reduction in cost, but it's still way too expensive to compete with the meat we buy every day. Getting that price down is still the name of the game. And that brings up a really tough question. Even if we nail the science, even if we get the cost down to compete with chicken nuggets, is that enough? There's a real possibility that cellular agriculture could fail, and it might have nothing to do with the technology itself. And here's the kicker. It is not a fair fight. Not even close. Conventional animal farming is propped up by billions and billions of dollars in government subsidies. That keeps the price you pay at the counter artificially low. Meanwhile, this brand new technology, which needs a ton of investment in research and development, is mostly being built by the private sector. For this to really take off, it's going to need more than just smart scientists. It's going to need smart public policy. Okay, so even with all those hurdles, the future possibilities here are what make this whole field so ridiculously exciting. We're not just talking about replacing what we have. We're talking about creating things that have never existed before. I absolutely love this quote because it completely flips the script. The goal isn't just to make a perfect copy of a sausage. That's the starting block, not the finish line. The real mind-bending potential is in unlocking a whole new universe of food creation. Think about it. We have cuts of meat, a steak, a pork chop, because they're defined by the anatomy of an animal. But when you grow meat from cells, those rules just disappear. You could design meat to have any texture, any form, meat that's paper thin, meat that's crunchy. You could even have bubbly meat. It's a brand new ingredient for chefs, just like when we first figured out fermentation to make bread and cheese.
And this goes way, way beyond the kitchen. Imagine freeing up the 1/3 of our planet's ice-free land that we currently use for livestock. We could rewild massive ecosystems. We can also supercharge the research by pairing it with other advanced tech. That's what's happening with groups like the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute, using AI to solve the complex biological puzzles way faster than we could on our own.
And that's really what it all boils down to. With cellular agriculture, humanity is getting something that we almost never get, a do-over, a second shot at designing our food system from the ground up to be more ethical, more secure, and more sustainable. This is as big a deal as the shift from hunting and gathering to farming 10,000 years ago. The tools are being forged right now. So the only real question left is, what are we going to build with them? Thanks for joining this explainer.